Hi folks, today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. We're going to be doing an over-explained run, really taking our time and discussing all of our decisions. More importantly, we're going to be diving deep into Brotato's mechanics. Now, if you want to just skip ahead, I went ahead and put timestamps in the description below about the topics we do cover. However, I promise you, by the end of this run, you're going to have a much better understanding about how to win in Brotato. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Now, without further ado, let's get started with well-rounded. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be diving really deep into these mechanics, so let's go ahead and quickly touch base on all these weapons. I think knives are a really good melee weapon, especially in crit builds. Notably, that crit modifier goes all the way up to, I believe, 4.5. Legendary sticks are also one of the best melee weapons, and I think you can make either of these two weapons work quite well on well-rounded, which can be played as a melee or ranged character. Cacti Club, kind of a fun weapon on generalist, not really super valuable outside of that. Ghost weapons in general are very, very good. I think you can make a well-rounded ghost build, well-rounded ethereal ghost build work very, very well on well-rounded. Pistols, relatively weak range weapon. Don't really like them. Tasers, elemental isn't really amazing outside of the classes where it shines, although you could certainly make this work. I do think of the two, shotguns and SMGs are both very, very good. I think shotguns are definitely a higher tier weapon at the end of the game, where SMGs are a little bit better at the start. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start with SMGs and our over-explained Brotato run, diving deep into mechanics and helping you get that PhD in Brotato. Class is in session, my friends, and without further ado, let's dive deep, whiteboard at the hands, ready to learn. Well, of course, having fun and cracking some jokes along the way as we play through this run here now. I don't mind tossing a reroll early. I do think early on things like harvesting or just flat damage are really, really powerful. And I do like sticking with the gun type on this character, notably going with this shotgun, which is quite good, as well as the SMGs. And I do think those weapons work relatively well together. The gun weapon type in Brotato is sort of like the vanilla ice cream in the sense it has the most weapons in that type. In addition, it allows you to mix and match weapons that do different things, which I think is a key to success in Brotato. When playing Brotato, we generally want to think about, is the weapon class that we're using one that really needs to be all or nothing, or is it one that can be mixed and matched? And I do think gun weapon type is definitely one that can be mixed and matched. Early on in Brotato, I really think damage is super important, whether it's melee, ranged, elemental, or engineering. So I'm really happy with that damage here. One thing, especially early on in Brotato, is I really like to pay attention to upgrade rarity. So for example, here getting 6% speed is really, really valuable, and I do like a coupon. We will go ahead and take a shredder, as well as both an SMG, shredder, and a gentle alien, leaving us just a little bit behind heading into wave 3. Something else I often think about when playing Brotato is, am I clearing the waves efficiently enough? And I sort of have ballparks in my head for how many materials I like to have for each wave. So on wave 3, for example, I typically like to end with about 75 materials. That usually means I'm able to clear the map efficiently. So on top of the 20 or so materials we had, we should finish this around 95 materials by the time all is said and done. And I'll talk a little bit more about, finishing up the thing. So you can see not exactly, but right around 991, I think, before that wave expired. While I do value blue upgrades, I don't really need defense early on. Percent damage is weaker to the back half of the game, and we do not need range, so I'm happy to reroll there, and even tossed another reroll. And I think damage is valuable enough in the early parts of the game where I am happy with that ranged damage. We'll pick up another SMG as well as a shredder, giving us 6 weapons here, which makes me very, very happy, and I don't think any of these are quite good enough to take, so we'll go ahead and save my money. Notably, when using weapons, they have, I point at the screen as if you could see me, a weapon type. This can be gun, as we see here on all these weapons, or things like primitive or precise, just depending on what weapon you're using, and they usually give you a bonus. Now, understanding which of these tags are valuable and which isn't is pretty important. For example, support giving you harvesting, precise giving you crit, primitive giving you extra HP, explosive giving you extra explosion size are all really valuable tags, and when using weapons of those tags, it is usually pretty important to maintain that weapon tag, especially in the beginning of the game. We're using guns, that simply gives us range, which isn't really a valuable item, so or valuable tag in the sense that range is a relatively not great stat in the set. So I'm usually not too worried about the gun tag, although it does allow us to take things like Cyclops worms early. I do really like getting that speed, more or less ready to go. 17 speed is plenty, and I do like a little bit of luck early. We'll go ahead and upgrade a gun here. I don't really need any of these, and I am really happy with another shredder here. So now we kind of have our first interesting decision of the game in the sense, notably the shredders have explosives as well as the gun tag, meaning we can go to 3 shredders, giving us a nice plus 10% explosion size, or we can simply opt to go to 2 blue shredders. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong decision here, and I'm going to go ahead and opt to stick with 2 shredders for the moment, as we have that shotgun, which does a little bit of area damage as well, meaning we're going to have just enough clear. And that's something I really do like about the gun weapon type, is that it is really flexible in the sense you can go with things like shredders, which give you really good clear, especially with groups of enemies, and combine these things with things like SMGs or even laser guns, which give us really good single target damage, and things like shotguns that do a little bit of both. In Brotato, I usually want to think about, do I have good single target damage and do I have sufficient clear? Obviously, items like Baby with a Beard, as well as bandanas or ricochets really help our clear. So just depending on how I feel on where we are there, that definitely does drive my weapon choices. Now, I know we're kind of keeping this abstract, and I promise we'll dive a little bit deeper into specific mechanics as they come up. I do think percent damage is relatively weak early in the game. That said, I don't really feel the need for a ton of HP there, so I'm happy to take that free item there. Here, I do think attack speed generally gives us better clear, so I'll be happy to take that attack speed. Again, I want to get our range damage up, really by any means necessary early, which means I'm happy with items like a hedgehog, as I don't really mind losing HP regen. I think laser guns are very, very good if we need help killing bosses or elites. In this particular part of the game, we're doing just fine, you know, with 1 purple and 2 blue weapons, so I don't feel compelled to go for a laser gun. We have elites on wave 12, 14, and 17. Plant HP regen tends to be my least favorite way to heal, so we'll pass on that for now. And obviously, I don't want to lose range damage. We can consider the Terrified Onion. Luck is not really impactful till about wave 10 or so, in my opinion. So this is not a bad item. However, our speed is just fine, so I'm not super worried about that. I'm much happier upgrading our weapons, as that will directly translate to damage. And as we're not playing endless mode, I'm not super worried about that snail. Although I would take it if I got it at the right time. When these waves start getting into 60 seconds is when I'm going to start diving a little bit more mechanics. In the meantime, just really over explaining my decisions here in order to, you know, help people get a little bit better. In addition, I'm going to try to comment on pretty much every single item we see or are given the opportunity to consider. You can see with just that little bit of range damage, we're able to do a much better job of keeping the wave clear. As we head here into D5, really with no issues on wave 6. I do take 1 tick of damage there, playing just a little bit sloppy. And I obviously want to try to prioritize taking out these trees in order to get just a little bit more chances of getting that great. So definitely don't want to leave those trees alive. And towards the end of the wave, I will sort of aggressively try to pick up all materials, as money now is better than money later. So when it comes to harvesting, on characters that start with harvesting, it's almost always better to get more harvesting. I mean, that's pretty much without exception. On characters without harvesting, you know, it's not always the right choice to go into it. Specifically, the back of the napkin, I want to play quick math. I use is I just multiply how many waves left by how many by how much harvesting we have in front of us. So if we have, let's say, I believe we have 13 waves left, 10 times 8 is 80, and then 3 times 8 is 24, meaning this will give us about 104 more materials over the course of the run. And obviously that tends to increase at about 5% per wave, meaning it's a little more. So early on, that's quite a bit of materials, and I'm happy with that. I'm looking for something just a little bit better, and I don't mind re-rolling a little bit aggressively. Even if I don't really love our choices, I'll go ahead and take that harvesting there as well. Lost Duck is one of the best items for luck on non-elemental characters, as it's essentially just luck without downside. Obviously, duct tape and pencil are engineering items, which I don't really want to see. I do like Poisonous Tonic, giving us both attack speed and crit, and I'm usually pretty happy to drop HP regen. With that, we're going to head here into wave 7, which is notably the wave where eggs start spawning, which means we want to make sure that we're running around and going to try to take these eggs out before they spawn into the slasher enemy type. Now, the slashers are not actually that difficult to dodge or survive. The real disadvantage of letting slashers spawn is they just have a lot of hit points, which means that we could be killing more enemies. Instead, we're letting those slashers soak up our bullets, which means we just don't get as many materials from that wave. And that really is the main reason we want to try to take those slashers out with a little bit more of a priority, or those eggs, before they do spawn into slashers, simply because we don't want to waste our sort of opportunity cost of dealing damage by having to take out those high health enemies. So if we're able to keep the slashers down, we will do a better job of overall clearing the map. Even if the slashers do give us more materials compared to a normal item, it's still more efficient to keep them down and keep taking out other enemies. I do love Ritual. It's one of my favorite items in the game, giving us essentially only positive stats if we are not in engineering, which we are not here. And again, we're presented some really interesting choices here with both armor, hands, and nose, all being really good items. Obviously, harvesting giving us at this point times 12 more waves, 120 materials, which will help snowball quite a bit. 3 armor gives us a substantial amount of defense, and 15 luck will help us find more items. At this point in the game, I'm happy grabbing the harvesting. Same with fertilizer. Again, that melee damage being inconsequential, and I do like that poisonous tonic quite a bit. I really do like both the coupon, again, one of my favorite items, as well as the SMG. And I do think crit is somewhat okay. It's not amazing with SMGs, as notably SMGs only have a 1.5 times crit modifier. However, tentacle is one of my favorite items to heal in the favorite items in the game when it comes to healing. So we'll go ahead and pick that up. So here on wave 8, let's talk about healing. The 2 most common ways to heal in Brotato are Lifesteal, which triggers on attack or HP regen, which gives you a passive amount of regen per second. Notably, if we hold over this HP regen here, you'll see how much HP you're regenning, and notably, if you hold over Lifesteal, you'll see that we have a 2% chance to heal for 1 HP when we attack, which is pretty important. Lifesteal tends to be better than HP regen overall, although that's not to say that, you know, on characters like Doctor, HP regen is bad, or if we're just given a lot of HP regen early in the game, that's something we necessarily want to just ignore. Well, there's other ways you can heal as well, and as I like to say in Brotato, you normally want to try to find a healing solution, be that something simple as a tentacle or a cute monkey in order to heal off materials, or even something like a lot of luck, as luck does increase those fruits that drop on the map, which help heal you. So I do think thinking about a healing solution is important, as just a little bit of healing will give you a lot more safety and allow you to play a lot more aggressively and take out a lot more enemies. So whether that's HP regen or lifesteal or cute monkeys or anything like that, you know, any of them work. You just want to make sure you have a way to heal. Again, I do think back or fingers at these rarities are really, really good because we have that tentacle. I am happy with crit chance. We don't really need any of these. Rip and Tear is one of my favorite items on melee builds specifically. If we're not doing endless mode, as notably Rip and Tear cannot crit. So if we have a Haunting Trophy, that's not going to work. That said, Rip and Tear is really, really powerful melee. That said, we are paying range, so we'll pass that. Torquil, one of the solid items, sort of the building block items for elemental or melee builds, of which we are neither. Pencil is obviously more focused on engineering, and Thief Dagger is one of the most powerful items in the game. However, we are not going melee here, so we will pass on that. I do like boxing gloves. They work really, really well against the pursuer enemy, which starts appearing on wave 11 or 12, and I'll go ahead and point that out when it happens. And I do like a broken mouth as well. It's one of my favorite items to give us more HP, especially if we're focusing on things like lifesteal as well as tentacle. You know, we have our healing solved more or less between the tentacle and the lifesteal. So at this point, I'm happy to tank range as much as possible. In addition, something to think about Brotato is there's a huge advantage in just giving up in a stat. If we just say, hey, we don't really care about HP regen from this point forward, we can just go ahead and take items that give us negative of that stat with Reckless Abandon, which really allow us to focus in on a sort of build or a way we want to play our character. And that can be negative lifesteal and just have us focus on HP regen or vice versa. So I'm usually happy, if my build permits it, to tank one of those two. And as I'm talking, I forgot to buy that community support before this wave. However, that is life. And I will be okay with that. We're here on wave 9, which is the notable wave where lots of little enemies do start spawning. And that is, you know, this is what I like to call the fake out wave in Brotato, because a lot of enemies spawn, but they're all the weaker enemy types in the game. This is the fake out wave in Brotato because it will often mislead you into thinking that your build is really, really strong and that you're doing super well, when realities, most builds are able to effectively clear this wave, and it feels like you've got a powerful build because you're taking out a lot of enemies. Wave 9, you typically want to add about 450 to 500 materials. If you're not able to do that, that usually means your area clear is pretty bad, and that's something you want to prioritize moving forward, whether that's attack speed or a different weapon with better clear. So again, just because you wreck this wave and get a ton of materials does not mean your build is necessarily together, as this wave is usually pretty easy for most characters. Wisdom is one of my least favorite items in non-endless mode, and it's not that good. the thing is, we lose 20% damage, and we obviously end up breaking even 20 seconds in, meaning that past 20 seconds, this item is a net benefit. However, especially with elites, where I like to really try to burst them down on most characters, I'm not really a big fan of this item, and as such, I will recycle this. We do not need a black belt. And weird food, I think, is okay on certain builds, especially if we're relying on fruits to heal. Here on weird food, I don't really care about the regen from the fruit, so we're going to go ahead and skip that. I'm feeling pretty strong. I do feel a little bit behind on range damage. However, again, we're talking about comparative values. I'm not going to pass up 12 max HP, and at this 12% damage, I do think that is quite good. And this time, we will not forget to pick up the community support. Don't really love pistols, and we're already at -2 armor, so I do not necessarily see a need to drop it even further. And we're going to go ahead and upgrade weapons here. Do like another community support that does put us at a little bit of a precarious position, but I think we'll be able to manage. Notably, like I mentioned, being able to just sort of ignore either HP regen or lifesteal is valuable, as again, we can keep taking things like Shady Potion and not really worry about that. I really do like a couple of items here, notably Blindfold, giving us just a touch of dodge and a little bit more crit, which works really, really well with our Tentacle. And I also really do like Metal Plate, again, getting us back up to a more understandable -2 armor. I don't really think it's worth rerolling too many times, although I do think rerolling in general is better than a lot of people think. So anyway, without further ado, we'll go ahead and head into Wave 10. All right, here in Wave 10, we're going to go ahead and talk about armor. Armor is a relatively interesting sort of stat in Brotato, in the sense that every point of armor you get is just as valuable as the point of armor you get before it, meaning armor does not have diminishing returns in Brotato. Every point of armor you can get is just as valuable. This means armor is a very effective way to reduce the amount of damage you're taking, and armor is quite good. Even just 1 or 2 points of armor can give you a lot of defense. Now, notably, armor only works that way when going up. When armor is negative and we're losing armor, each point of armor we lose only increases our damage taken by just a little bit. Essentially, negative armor is simply additive. This means that you're not really penalized by going into huge negative points of armor, like you are incentivized to go into higher points of armor. That said, for most builds, I do think getting a little bit of armor is a very, very good thing. Generally, I like between 6 and 10 by the end of the game on a normal D520 clear, although, again, you do not necessarily need that much. Especially if you have really good damage. We're not going to elementals and no toxic sludge. I do think baby gecko has its uses, especially when combined with cute monkeys, but we're not really doing that here just yet. And I'll go ahead and take a touch of speed as well as percent damage. Because our speed is so good, I really do like an Ugly Tooth, a really strong item, because it actually reduces the speed of elites projectiles, which is very, very valuable. It makes killing elites a lot easier, so I'm quite happy to see that. We'll go ahead and upgrade some shotguns here. Again, I think pistols are relatively weak, so I'm not really incentivized to combine and upgrade here. And I do like a bait as well. We are given one of the absolute best items in the game, and Baby with a Beard, which really does help our clear. Notably, these projectiles can in fact crit, and not only that, they are affected both by our range damage as well as our percent damage, which is why we see those bullets hitting for 9, even though we only have 5 ranged damage. Really do like Butterfly, again, because we are going into lifesteal, and I do like Hunting Trophy, even though I do not think it's necessarily as good in normal mode as other people may think. Now, notably here, we do see that Pursuer enemy type, which can be one of the more challenging types of enemies in the game, which are these little sort of armor guys that are chasing us down. The Boxing Glove is really, really valuable in making those items a lot more manageable. So if you find yourself struggling on waves, 10, 11, 12, where they start spawning, I do recommend picking up a Boxing Glove nice and early. Now let's talk just a bit about crit. Before this most recent patch, truthfully, crit was not great on a lot of builds. You have to understand, if you have a 2x crit modifier, crit is just essentially percent damage. However, in Brotato, we are able to kill most of the enemies in one shot. This means in the past versions of the game, crit was not great because it just allowed us to overkill enemies, and crit really was not a stat that I valued, even on items that had a 2x crit modifier. Notably, in the most recent patch, they added things like Tentacle, Giant Belt, as well as obviously Hunting Trophy, and with those additional items, I do think crit is much more valuable in the current version of the game. In addition, crit is really, really good for killing bosses because we can't overkill bosses or elites. So again, I do think crit is decent, especially on things like Shotgun, which have a 2x crit modifier. On things like SMGs, it's not nearly as valuable, and I do think people sometimes overvalue crit, although again, crit is still good in the sense that it really works well with items like Tentacles, Hunting Trophies, and Giant Belt, all of which are really, really powerful. So we're offered some items here that are really going to sort of take this build to the next level. Minigun is one of the best single target items in the game, and notably it does have a piercing effect, meaning it will hit enemies behind it. Because we tend to have, you know, looking at the weapons here, I will go ahead and grab a minigun, and then we'll go ahead and upgrade that to an explosive shredder, although I will be taking that tentacle. Notably, we are heading into a Wave 12 Elite, so we'll go ahead and see how this shakes out. So this is the RHINO Elite. I do think this is the easiest of the 3 elites we face in this game. And the best way I like to handle this, especially for the first phase, is just let this elite sort of charge me. And then when he charges me, just gently duck around, as we can kind of see there. So far, not getting hit. He will charge with greater frequency, as well as a little bit of a different sort of pattern. We can see that sort of happening here as he enters his second phase. All elites in Brotatos, as I missed the dodge there and get hit by the bruiser, do have 3 different phases. And of course, as I'm trying to demonstrate here, while talking about what this elite does, I do take a little bit of damage, but that is okay. In fact, sometimes I think it's good to show how one does recover from Brotato. So I do think we'll be able to take this elite out without too much trouble. We can kind of see our lack of range damage being just a little bit of an effect here. Now, if you're unable to kill the Wave 12 elite, that is more than okay. We are able to take that elite out there a little bit closer than I would have liked. But that is what happens when I'm actually trying to explain the elite's mechanics and dodge, as well as trying to beat the elite with -2 armor. That's, excuse me, elite is taken out. With -10 range, I do like glasses for free, and we are playing normal mode, so there are no padding for us. Unfortunately, we were given a wolf helmet, which does nothing. However, it does give us 15 luck, so I'm happy to take that. And again, we feel really behind on range damage, so I'm happy to pick that up. When I do feel behind on damage, I'm really not afraid to aggressively reroll for either range, melee, elemental, things like that. As a general rule of thumb, I like my range damage to be at or above the level, the wave that I'm on, meaning at this point in the game, I would prefer 13 range damage. I do think you want about 25 to take those bosses out. And I double that for melee, meaning I usually like my melee damage to be about twice what my range damage is. So because we're behind, I'm really happy with an alloy, even if that does drop our dodge down. Because we do have a hunting trophy, I really do like this tentacle, and I am going to go ahead and upgrade to a legendary shredder. A legendary shredder is very, very good because now all our projectiles do hit, and this weapon pierces 3 times. So that is a very, very good upgrade. We are given another hunting trophy, which I will pick up, as well as a warrior's helmet, again, just to get the armor a little bit more back on track. Now, let's talk a little bit about re-rolling here for just a second. Oftentimes, I think it's better to aggressively reroll. You know, there's only about 20 waves in the normal game. Not about, there's only 20 waves in the normal game. And if you only reroll, you know, 3 or 4 times per wave, that means you're only going to see about 80 times 4 items, right? So about 80, 60, 160, about 320 items. So I am a fan of aggressive rerolling rather than saving money because of the way inflation works in this game. It can just be not quite as beneficial as I think a lot of players may immediately think to hold on to money forever. Now, I'm not going to reroll an 80 reroll shop if I only have 100 materials left, but I generally think it's a good thing to reroll a little bit more aggressively than many players, I think, initially do. That said, if there's items on the shop that I already like, I'm not going to reroll, right? So here we go. We've got a hunting trophy that I want to buy, as well as a warrior's helmet. And because we are sort of able to effectively spend our money next wave, I'm happy to go ahead and just leave those there. You can see we are much quicker here due to some of that speed we picked up, and notably that additional range damage we picked up is really, really going to help us do a good job and dealing a little bit more damage. As that last elite really did demonstrate that while we had the core piece of the build together, we are very much behind in specific range damage. So I am sort of aggressively going to try to fix that here. And again, the goal here is to show like a normal powered run, not necessarily something that starts off immediately overpowered. And I do think this is sort of a good example there. And I do think that range damage will do a really good job of helping us get back on track. Notably, I am playing with really, really low armor. You, unless you feel pretty confident in your gaming in this game, should probably not drop past wave 10 into negative armor. If you're more experienced and more confident in your dodging like I am, you know, I don't mind going down to negative 3 or 4 armor, even late into the game. So that is something to keep in mind, as I'm playing just a touch more aggressively than you probably want to. But overall, feeling pretty good about this here. So we are able to clear that wave relatively efficiently, so I will be happy to grab another hunting trophy. I do like all of these here. I do think wheat is one of the best items in the game, truly. But we're going to go ahead and buy this warrior's helmet first, as we are going into wave 14 elite, and I am really, really happy with this wheat. Again, giving us harvesting as well as a much needed 2 range damage. And I'm a big, big fan of items like gentle alien as well as mouse. Basically adding more enemies onto the map means we're going to get more loot and we're going to scale faster. I'm a big, big fan of these items, and I essentially always take them if there's any way I can manage. I really do like bags. They're one of the best items in the game. However, at this point, we probably don't have enough time in the game to get some value out of that. So we'll head here into Wave 12, where we fight the Monk Elite, notably spawning these eggs in the first phase before they will sort of attack more aggressively in Wave 2. If you have enough damage, it is very possible to destroy this Monk Elites before they're even able to spawn their first set of eggs. So if you have a lot of damage, that's often the strategy I like to take. That happens more so with melee characters. In Wave 2, they run around and sort of spawn their projectiles. In Wave 3, they move a little bit slower and cause this sort of circle of projectiles around us. Notably, we are able to take that elite without too much of an issue. However, one of the big things in Brotato when killing elites is you want to make sure you either kill them quickly or you're able to kill the things around them. A big issue when fighting elites in Brotato is maybe you're able to kill the elite, but you allow so many enemies to spawn that you get overwhelmed. And notably, Wave 14 and Wave 15 elites oftentimes are considered the hardest part of Brotato because this is when the junky enemy type appears, which are these little guys with hats that spawn projectiles. They are one of the, if not the most lethal enemy in the game, as they can quickly overwhelm the map with projectiles and end most runs. While I don't love losing more armor, I really do want more range damage. Now we're at a much more acceptable 17 range damage here, and we'll go ahead and get that armor back positive. I'm happy with the bait, and notably, coffees are one of the best items in the game. I really do think so, giving us a huge 10% attack speed and only a 2% damage bonus, so I'm really happy with coffee. We don't really have a valuable upgrade there, so we'll go ahead and keep it moving. And I do love another wheat, again, giving us even more range damage, which is quite good. I will be purchasing the shredder. I'm just going to sort of quickly think about in what order I want to take these items. I do really like bandana. I don't love losing that % damage, but allowing all our projectiles to pierce work extremely well with SMGs, shredders, shotguns, and miniguns. So we really have a slew of weapons that work well there. And I do want to get pretty much every bit of range damage I can, so we're going to go ahead and pick that up there as well. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is speed. How much do you need and how valuable is it? I think speed is extraordinarily valuable on both normal and melee and ranged characters. Generally, though, there are diminishing returns. I think about 20 speed is sufficient for me, although you typically need closer to 30 to 40 in order to, have a little bit of an easier time to outrun the bosses. I generally feel pretty comfortable in Brotato if I have between 25 and 35 speed by the end of the game, although if I have more, I'm not necessarily complaining. That said, I do think once you start getting past like 50 or 60, that amount of speed is a little bit overkill. If you have a power generator or something like that, I'm not going to not take speed, but at the same time, I do think speed is quite valuable. Notable speed breakpoints that I also keep in mind is I really like 10% speed by Wave 7. I do think that 10% speed just makes hunting down the eggs so much easier, and that wave can be pretty challenging and also helps a lot in dodging the bruisers. So I do like to pick up that first 10% speed pretty early. Spicy sauce, we're not really going to get a ton of value out of it, even though we do have somewhat good melee damage. That said, for free, I'm happy to take that. And again, because we've got a couple crit adjacent items, I'm happy with another tentacle there. Again, I really value range damage, so I'm very happy with the hedgehog. And we will go ahead and dunk a blue shredder for a legendary shredder there. A gambling token is an okay item. I don't think it's that good, though. Barricade is essentially an item you should almost never take unless you're playing soldier or you're worried about endless mode. Again, we already talked about tasers, and I don't think paddings are good enough in normal Brotato. Missile can sometimes be worth it, notably when you start to get to about 20 or so range damage. However, here, I'll probably just go ahead and pass, although with 2 community supports, it may end up being a good pickup. Really do like a big arms. Again, we really want to get that range damage as high as we can. And I'm somewhat tempted by a peaceful bee because we feel like we're okay in range damage, and I'm sort of tempted to get that dodge positive, but I'll go ahead and pass for now. Really do love another wheat. With only 1 armor, I'm happy to take that helmet, even though I do think that's a relatively mid item. So next, let's quickly talk about damage. In most ports in Brotato, the damage, whether elemental, melee, ranged, or engineering, is going to be the better upgrade choice over % damage. Notably, this starts to change once you get to about 15 to 20 damage, whether that's ranged or melee. So early on, I really do prioritize getting the damage up itself and don't really worry about % damage until we're about here in the game. That said, when you have 20 range damage and you get 10% more damage, that's just essentially 2 extra damage, right? So at that point, it does become a lot more valuable. The other thing to think about when it comes to considering damage versus % damage is the weapon in question. So things like sticks, for example, have a ton of base damage, and spears are another one. So items like that, weapons like that, do like percent damage a little bit more than things like SMGs, which don't really have a ton of percent damage. So it is good to sort of look at the weapons you're dealing with. Think about, should we be focusing more on percent damage or just regular damage? I'd say most weapons in the game, though, we typically want more regular damage. No duct tape for us. A couple things that can be good here, and we'll go ahead and take a little bit of armor, as you know, 6 is plenty for what we're trying to do. Notably, if you look at your weapon, you will see that damage here, 27 and 31. The game does calculate your damage and your percent damage on the weapon tooltip, which is a good way to kind of understand where things are standing. So you can see this SMG, which now has 70% scaling versus the SMG 60% scaling, you know, makes a difference there in 27 versus 31 damage. I do love this wheat, again, giving us a little bit more range damage as well, which is quite good. And again, with Vigilante Ring, that's something you tend to need to think about. Notably, this does trigger at the end of a wave. So we'll have at the end of wave 17, 18, and 19 before hitting the bosses. That's 9% damage. That's about 2.7 range damage. Is almost 3 range damage worth at this point? Yeah, probably for 216. So I'll be happy to pick that up. Although, again, it's not like necessarily amazing. I do really value attack speed. I do think Banner is a relatively decent item. Alien Tongue has its uses. I think it's an okay item, but I don't really think we need it here. My rule of thumb is I usually have 2 or more explosive weapons. I'm happy with the dynamite. Since we do have 2 shredders, and those shredders really do explode on every single projectile hit, I am happy with that. Now we are fighting the third elite here, which is the Butcher. I think this is the elite that new players struggle with the most. Again, it has 3 phases and notably puts the sort of things on the ground that you have to dodge. That said, this elite tends to be the easiest if you have good just good burst damage, as in that elite tends to be the easiest if you deal a lot of damage, and it tends to be the hardest if you don't deal very good damage. So you can see there, our damage is back on track, and we're able to take that out relatively easily. And I do think that speaks to more of a overall concept in Brotato, which is just a good offense really makes the game easier, and offense is definitely king in Brotato. Basically, if we can kill things quickly, we don't have to dodge them as long, and that sort of easy butcher kill was a good example of that. Now, we are fortunate that we do have some good things like Baby with the Beard as well as Bandana to keep these waves nice and clear, where we're able to take that enemy out. But you can see really starting to cruise here, and that tends to happen when you put a good run of Brotato together. Is very often you get to the end of the game and you just really start sailing. Potato, an item I don't really love in Endless, but for normal mode, which is what we're playing here, just good. I mean, again, giving us just a little bit of everything. So I do like to see that. And again, no need to pick up a turret. And for free, I'll take a tardigrade, although again, I think the item is relatively medium in normal Brotato. We do have enough percent range damage where this percent damage is pretty valuable, so I'm happy with that. Really do like another potato as we play Brotato. Again, just giving us a bunch of everything. I don't really think we need an adrenaline. I do think that item is sort of medium. So here we are going to take handcuffs. Generally, I like handcuffs a lot. Now, the thing to keep in mind with handcuffs is they are better on ranged, as range tends to have half the scaling that melee does in this game. So, 8 range damage is equivalent to about 16 melee damage. If I'm happy with my HP, I'm happy to take this. I'm happy with 67 HP, and that 8 range damage is absolutely huge. Notably, we do feel a little bit behind on our weapons, and we're not given a ton of good upgrades here, as we do have multiple weapons, which this just shows the danger of having a bunch of different weapons, as it is harder to upgrade. So we are sort of dealing with that here. Now, wave 18, this is a good time to talk about dodge, because notably, we only have 5. How important is dodge? Should I be thinking about it? Dodge is definitely better on melee characters who have to be up close and personal. I think have a harder time sort of staying out of the fray. The way I like to think about dodge is like, hey, look, if I'm able to miss 1 out of 2 attacks at 50% dodge, does that help me quite a bit? If we have a lot of damage, not really. As in, if we're able to kill things in 10-15 seconds, I don't think it's really that important. If we do feel behind, dodge is relatively good, especially once we get to about 50%. Dodge is really, really good on bosses and elites, specifically the bosses. The bosses hit like trucks in Brotato, and I do think a little bit of dodge will help you a lot, especially if you're less experienced in the attack patterns. So if you're newer, I do think prioritize dodge effectively. If you're able to put together a good offensive build, which it looks like we're able to do here with those handcuffs, I will not worry about it quite as much. That said, we do feel a little bit behind on our weapons. So I do hope that we're able to get those upgraded just a little bit here before heading into the final a couple waves here. Do like a diamond with the 2 shredders, and I am really looking for range damage, and I love that 3 ranged damage here. You know, with 8 armor, I am happy with the glass cannon and happy to finally start getting these SMGs upgraded. You know, a 3rd community support, sure, we'll take it. I think community support legitimately is arguably the best item in the game. I'm not going to say is absolutely the best item in the game, but is absolutely up there as one of, if not the best items in the game. So I'm feeling pretty good here as we head into wave 19. Again, hoping that this sort of demonstrates a little bit about how I'm able to build my Brotato characters and like what I find effective. In this specific build, I'd say we're doing okay. A little bit more explosive weapons than I'd like. I really would like something like a legendary SMG or even like a legendary laser gun at this point just to give us a little better single target damage. That said, 38 range damage is a whole heck of a lot. And I do not think we're going to have a hard time taking out those bosses, especially with 3 or potentially even 3 community supports, which is just going to help us really overwhelm those bosses. And I'm quite happy with that. That's a touch of armor or even a weapon upgrade is where I do like to be. So I am hopeful we're able to pull those off here. Excited to sort of recap this build as we head into the bosses. As a reminder, I'm still quite new to YouTube, and if you're watching this video and would not mind tossing me a subscribe, I would be ever so grateful. Obviously love the sort of quick start we've had here. If you do that for me, I would love you forever. As I do hope this sort of talked a little bit more about mechanics. Now, notably, there's a lot I didn't get to cover, so I will cover some more of these mechanics, potentially in a different run. You know what? I feel low enough in armor where I'm going to pass and then go to Berserker, and I am looking for more offense going into the bosses, so I'm going to take that 12% damage. I do like just a touch of armor there, and we'll take a little bit more armor as well, putting me at 7, which I think is more than plenty. I will go ahead and combine. We'll go and combine into a legendary SMG. I do think that is good, although I am looking for just 1 or 2 better weapons. And now, seeing this, I'm happy that we grabbed that upgrade there. That said, feel a little bit behind on weapons. Would really like a big arms here, and this is going to be an interesting choice. I do think we'll be correct. We're going to go ahead and combine into a legendary shotgun and go ahead and grab a laser gun, as laser guns give us really good single target damage. So this will help us against the boss. Laser guns are not good outside of anything of killing bosses and elites, or of course if you're playing Jack. The last thing I'll quickly touch on, the last sort of lesson, is that not all item upgrades are equal. There are items like shotgun, like thief's dagger, like Thunder Sword, they get a huge buff in power and going to legendary. There are other items, other weapons like Chopper, which really aren't worth upgrading very much at all because they negligibly get better. And there's items that are kind of in between where they're worth upgrading, even if you don't necessarily want to go out of your way, things like SMGs. So I am really happy to get that legendary shotgun here. Again, giving us 4 to 6 times attacks, which is just a really good scaling. Now let's go ahead and quickly look at where we are. Notably, we're able to lower our max HP here, but we're at about 38 range damage. And what did I say at the beginning of the run? We typically want to target about 25 to have a good chance of killing the bosses. So between 111% damage and 38 range damage, we're in a really good spot, I think, to polish off these bosses without too much of an issue. 7 armor, and again, like I said, I like to target 6 to 10 myself. So we're right in there. Our dodge is very low, and our speed is also lower. Again, I like it to be closer to 20. So we're a little bit slow. We do not have as much dodge as I necessarily want. I think our armor is okay. Although I think our damage is quite good, and that is obviously the most important thing. Now, notably going into the bosses, there are 2 bosses here on D5. There is the Predator and there is the Invoker. The Predator is more of the blob-looking boss, and the Invoker is the one with the tentacles behind it. I generally almost always like to kill the Predator, aka the blob-looking boss, first. The reason being is when we get the Invoker, the one with the tentacles, into the second phase, they tend to do an attack pattern in a giant circle, which can really restrict your movement. This means if we're able to take the Predator and kill the Predator before we put the Invoker into stage 2, we will only have to deal with one boss when the Invoker's second stage sort of circle pattern is present, and we won't have to dodge both bosses when that's around. So because of that, I will be taking out the Predator first. So we'll go ahead and look for this Predator, which again is here. So I will be focusing on taking this elite out. And again, you can watch probably some other videos, or I might do a dedicated video on dodging the bosses, at least a strategy I like to utilize. That said, do take a little bit of damage there as I fail to effectively dodge. However, as you can see, the Predator is down, and now we get to sort of focus directly on the Invoker, which is much more efficient. So there you go. Nice, clean all-rounder. Again, not insanely overpowered or anything. You know, some decent weapons, but not anything great here. Getting a solid 1,000 materials off that hunting trophy, which was obviously quite helpful. But again, hopefully this shows you, hopefully this helped you think a little bit more about Brotato's mechanics. I might do another deep dive on some of the ones I was not able to cover here today. I did actually use a list for this video to make sure I hit everything I wanted to talk about, but I do hope you found this helpful. And if there's some more mechanical questions you have or anything else I can help you understand, of course, do comment below and let me know. As always, thank you for watching.